My name is Welzel. I'm a member of this European Horizon 2020 project about trust in European democracies. It turned out to be a very interesting endeavor in the end. Especially we came to different conclusions than what we were starting from. Our point of departure was that the function to be maximized is that citizens should have more trust into politics and into politicians and institutions that run our countries. And of course, this is for politicians a desired function because for them it's political capital. If you have a citizenry that is trusting, law-abiding, it means you can rely on compliance in whatever policies you want to implement. In the end, however, based on theoretical considerations as well as on our empirical data, it turned out that a trustful citizenry is not a good in it by itself, because it depends on how the politicians behave. If we think about this from the perspective of liberal democracy and how these institutions function and what fuels a vital democracy that is fed from energy from the bottom, from below, you need a citizenry actually that has much more of a watchdog mentality. It reminds me a little bit of Robert Axelrod's, who wrote a very important book about the evolution of cooperation. And he evolved this or developed this tit for tat principle. So this is baby language, but what it basically means, you give your counteracting partner some sense of credit in the first moment, but if it's betrayed, you take revenge, so to speak. So tit for tat. So it needs to be reciprocated. And it is much better for democracy to have a citizenry that has kind of a watchdog mentality. That means you have an assertive citizenry where you have civil society organizations, social movements, voluntary associations, more generally speaking, who are aware of their legitimate interests and what they need. And this is actually the basic idea what we thought why democracy is a rational system, meaning that you have like a kind of a policy cycle. Politicians are voted into office because they made some promises. Then they implement policies and they meet or don't meet these promises. And then the citizens evaluate and perceive whether the promises have been met or not. If they have not been met, in the next election cycle, they would go cast their vote for the opposing party. And then the opposing party would come up with or implement alternative ideas. And then again, evaluation, policy implementation, evaluation, next electoral cycle. This is how we thought the electoral process would work. But this only works if politicians are credible. And it means that a lot of responsibility for this whole system to work relies on the fact that politicians who come up with electoral platforms and whatever they promise, that they at least halfway through give the impression that they really work for what they promised. So for the common good. And I think this is one of the most important points, to create a sense in the citizenry that at least most of representatives, of most who are voted into power, are working not for private benefit and their own entourage and their cronies, which always exist, of course, but really mostly are driven by a sense for the common good. They might have a wrong sense of the common good, but the important point is that they give an expression of authenticity, that what they are working for is what they think is the best for the community. And if that sense gets lost, then you get these anti-establishment feelings that are the flower bed for anti-establishment rhetoric, for populist parties. But rather than bashing them, my point of view is also to look at it from a different angle. When those populist parties have electoral success, it's also a seismograph that something is wrong in the system. So if these anti-establishment rhetorics work, there probably is a representation deficit in the society. Otherwise, those parties would not have electoral success. So we should also consider them as in a seismographic function. In our part of the project, we worked mostly with data from the World Value Survey, European Value Study. And we had the big advantage that we have a rather large scope and time. So these studies started in the 1980s. And we cover every country of the EU 27 and beyond. And we could also follow up different cleavages in society that are dividing lines of conflict. So very classical left-right about redistribution versus free market, but then also newer conflict lines about sexuality. Are we in favor of abortion rights and LGBTQ plus and woke things, or are we more traditional and conservative? Migration issue, nativism versus cosmopolitanism, sustainability issue, how much do we prioritize? Environmental protection, combating climate change over, we now have the conference in Brazil, climate summit versus job preservation, economic growth and these kinds of things. And we really could look at whether different socioeconomic groups in society, let's talk about social class, lower class, middle class, upper class, whether they moved apart in terms of their positioning on those issues, one by one, just the ones I mentioned. And we couldn't find that. So there was very, very little evidence of positional polarization between different socioeconomic groups in the electorates. However, everyone thinks polarization has increased. And this is still a little bit of a riddle, which probably has to do with the change of the media landscape, especially with the rise of the social media, echo chambers, and all this kind of stuff. And what we don't have good data on, but we have some evidence from the United States for sure, is that while positional polarization has not increased, we have also this evidence for the United States. So Republican voters and Democrat voters have not moved further apart in their ideological positions, but they hate each other more. And that's effective in contrast to positional polarization. So while positional polarization did not happen, effective polarization, people hate each other more, sort each other out where they move. Republicans don't want to live in a gay area in San Francisco, for sure. And a diehard Democrat does not want to be in any redneck area of the United States. So this has happened. And this is sort of the situation is quite complex. My key conclusion, if I make any recommendation to a politician, is don't make promises in an electoral campaign you already know you cannot meet. So that is, I think that's the crucial gem, that we need to have a political culture where trust is deserved or withdrawn because of a process is that politicians are credible in matters of their promises. If you like those or not is not the big point, but this kind of authenticity and also fighting corruption, embezzlement and all these kinds of things. And of course, for this we need investigative journalism and other civil society organizations that fulfill a watchdog function, because this will put the pressure on the whole recruitment process. If everyone knows who wants to become a politician, that there are these watchdog organizations, that there are the journalists who are digging out the courses in your cellar, then this will also change the recruitment process, so that you get more credible people as running for candidates. I think we need to work a bit more also on our methods of investigation, especially when it comes to survey research, like working with conjoint experiments, survey experiments, because we are always kind of the lurking danger is the social desirability effects that we have in survey research. One very well-known example is the underreporting of intentions to vote for a right-wing populist party. So we are always a bit surprised in Germany, for instance, that the AfD performs better in an actual election than the forecasters have been saying. So this is a challenge where we need to combine experimental methods with traditional survey research to come to more creative solutions to get really out what people truly think. So this is one of the challenges, for sure. And the other one, low cognition needs, it's a real problem, especially in the electoral segment that is leaning towards right-wing populist parties, that we know from research they are low on cognition needs. So those people are not placing much emphasis on being well-informed, double-checking the facts, and that makes it very easy for the Orbáns and Kaczynskis and Trumps and Dutertes and Moody's to get away with lies and with malperformance, with provable malperformance, because their supporters don't double-check, they don't fact-check. And that is a big problem.